Hey, this is Shilin, and today I want to talk a little bit about art as a career for people who are trying to get there right now. So, I myself have been doing art for 20 something years, like just drawing whatever I like for fun, not really worrying about practice or studies or going to classes or anything. And I started doing art professionally, after I graduated from college. I studied music, and then after I graduated, I was like, I don't want to teach kids. So I already had a lot of art built up just from drawing for fun by then, and I printed them into an art book and then printed the first volume of my comic, which I had also just drawn for fun for the past like 4 years. And that was in 2009, and we're in 2019 now. I'm on the 7th book of my comic. I started another comic on the side for fun, and I've printed 3 art books. I've been just living off my art since the 2nd year after university. So it's been a while, and it's all just from stuff that I do myself. So along the way, a lot of people from time to time would approach me and say like, how do you do it? How can I do it? What can I do? Do you have any suggestions? And then the more brave ones would be just straight up like, I followed your footsteps, I'm gonna get there. And sometimes it makes me nervous, sure, and I voice this to a lot of my viewers during my streams, especially when they tell me that I've encouraged them. The first thing I feel is guilt, because I don't want to make them feel like, no, I don't want to feel like, oh no, I led them down this horrible path of uncertainty and instability, and made them believe that they can actually make their dreams come true, because while yes, they can, there's also a huge chance that no, they won't, because it is so incredibly difficult to make a stable living in art. And that is because art is not just about doing art doing art for a living. Like me, it's not just about skill, hard work, knowing all the avenues to push your work and all of that, but also has a huge, big focus on luck and timing. And this is the shitty thing about having to talk about it, because if I mention that luck and timing is a thing, people will think, okay, I don't need to work hard because working hard won't get me anywhere. But if I don't, then people will think I just need to work hard, and if I have good work, people will come. I think luck and timing is really important, because doing art for a living when you are just working on your own original content and being basically being a content creator, except your content is just like your OCs and stories and art. Doing that for a living, you have to think not like an artist, but you are a businessman, and art is your product. And in order to get people to like your products and want to buy your products or need your products, there's a lot of elements of timing involved, right? It's a supply-demand kind of situation. And so because of that, let's say me, I start over from my starting points at 2009. Now in 2019, I do the exact same things. I might even work harder, I have better skill, and I try to get my comic off the ground as if it weren't published already. I try to do the same thing. I won't get the same results just because I'm the same person, just because I work the same, I work just as hard. It's not gonna get me anywhere, because 2019 is not the same as 2009. Back when I started my comic, I think the first volume of my comic, when it was printed and sold, it sold better than all of my previous comics. First, there's the this is the first volume factor, or this is the first book this artist has put out factor. So there's that, like, I gotta get my hands on it now. Who knows if she will ever print it again. But also, back then, there weren't many webcomics out there. There were even fewer webcomics that were printed into a book, because getting a book self-published even is a huge undertaking that costs a lot of time and even more money that a lot of people just don't have to invest and then potentially have it be a failure and not generate any profit. And so because of that, it's a lot easier to convince people to buy those books or enjoy my story. But these days, it's like it's established that you can make tens of thousands of dollars from just doing arts, drawing stuff that you like, as long as you hit the right fandoms, as long as your style is good, as long as you like put out content all the time. And when a buyer tries to look at arts, like, they would think, do I have the money for this? Do I have something similar to this already? Do I really want it or need it? Do I have shelf space? Just like the amount of time that they have to accumulate all the stuff that they already had made it a lot harder for new artists to sort of push their products to buyers or viewers as something that they need to buy, just because there's of the sheer amount of other works out there available for those viewers for free. And I think it's really important to recognize this aspect of doing art as a living, and recognize this aspect in the people that you look up to or you follow the footsteps of. And it's really important to be careful about which of those footsteps you try to follow. Because if you try to follow their timeline of progression, you run the danger of expecting the same things happening to you under completely different circumstances, in a completely different climate in the online world, in the online art world. And that will lead to disappointments in how well you can do for yourself. If you have a really high self-esteem, you would feel really salty and feel like you are owed success that you were not given just because you worked so hard or just because you believe in your work. And then if you have low self-esteem, you would think, oh my god, people who are worse than me are succeeding more than me. That means I'm actually worse than them, and that means I'm worthless. And neither of those really help you grow as a person that much, unless you're able to somehow overcome that kind of like bad mental thinking. And instead, I think when it comes to being inspired by people whose footsteps you want to follow, I think it's really important for you to follow in the things that they do. So rather than the timeline of progression, like they've done this in 2 years, I'm gonna try to do this in 2 years too. You follow their timeline of, okay, what did they do at certain points of their career and why? That why is so important, because it helps you think about when you're toning back to think, okay, where am I at right now? At this point in time, where do I stand? What do I want to do? And how do I want to get there? When you think about the solutions to the problems that you're going to encounter, be it being stuck in a certain level of skill, not being able to get more interest in followers, not being able to decide whether like freelance is for you or doing your own stuff is for you or getting a job is for you. Those things you really have to be able to think, like take the wisdom of people who's already done everything and then forget about them, like pretend they don't exist, and then take that wisdom, and then you have that wisdom now you think of your own solution to your own problem. You don't envision it in terms of, okay, hopefully I am doing the same thing as them, then in a couple months or in a couple years, what happened to them will happen to me too. Another thing that I find is really important, And this is more of a personal opinion because we all have different ways of making a living with art, and we all have what is suitable for us. Like, I do things on my own really well. I can work like 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I wouldn't feel miserable. Whereas somebody else would be like, holy shit, I can't keep myself at this. This is so boring, or I am getting like cabin fever. I need to get out. I need people around me. I need to work on something with a group. These kind of things differ from person to person, and what works for one person might destroy the next. And so all of this is just me thinking, speaking purely in what I think is important, with the bias of like me doing art as a living for myself on my own all the time, online. And that is because the timeline changes so much, because circumstances and what the customers, the viewers want changes so fast. I think it's really good to actually build on your own work rather than build on a platform. And what I'm talking about is, sometimes I hear people say like, hey Shilin, I want to do art for a living. I plan on starting a Patreon in a couple months or in a couple years. And then there are people who would like spread themselves thin, trying to accommodate the changes for the platform. So let's say stories on Instagram started becoming popular, and it helps the algorithm a lot. And so people who are already swarmed with work, they tell themselves, okay, this will help me grow my social media. And so they take precious time out of their workflow to make content for that specific new like format, so the story format, in order to benefit from what they think is going to net them a benefit. And what this kind of work does is it loads your already full plate with even more work that ties you to the success of the platform. And you don't know whether one day Instagram's gonna pull a Facebook or Twitter's gonna pull a Tumblr, and then everyone's like, Instagram sucks, I hate Tumblr, goodbye. They leave there and then maybe forget to bring you with them by following you on your other now new social media that you're migrating to. And that would really hurt you, and you can hear that from the people saying, like, for instance, last year or the year before, when Patreon added a fee to their payment structure for like very low pledges, that made the low pledges ridiculous to sustain, and people were so mad that they just withdrew their pledges, not realizing, oh, they're hurting the creators first. And then there are people who are like, I've lost like half my pledges, I don't know how I'm gonna make rent this month, because they depend on it. When you depend on a platform, you make it really dangerous for yourself, because now your success is tied to their platform. And I'm not saying not to do things for the platform in order to gain public interest, but I just mean like when an artist tries too hard to pay attention to the minute details of what other people, other platforms want out of them, what they build are things that are likely to last shorter. Whereas, let's say, like, I'm not praising myself or anything, but I'm pointing out the stability of my work. Over the years, I've always just drawn comics and painted paintings. And sometimes, sometime in the middle of the decade, I started making videos, and those things didn't really take much of my time, because what I did was I still draw as normal, and then it's just that I press a button to record now. And then I started streaming And I noticed that a lot of people would like do stream contents because that really helps keep your viewers interested, and by creating something that really is meaningful for them, like tutorials, requests, events, and stuff like that, which takes a lot of time. Like, it takes an incredible amount of time. You think it would be easy, but it's not. But despite me seeing that happen, I never really did any of them because I know with that effort I could just put it into my art, draw more, even though my viewers will probably never grow. It will just like stay at its peak of like this low level compared to everyone else who, when someone mentioned Twitch artist, and viewers would be like, oh yes, that person. Despite me not getting the biggest potential out of Twitch, what I'm doing is I'm investing that time in my own work, and I get to keep my own work. Even when Twitch dies, I will get to continue to use this work in a meaningful way to further expand myself, or to just make money off of it. I know I would have drawn a lot less, like if I did any requests or if I did any tutorials or paintovers, because those are like one-time things that I can't really monetize later on. And unless I enjoy drawing it, unless I enjoy doing those things like for my own pure enjoyment, it really doesn't do anything for me. And so I don't do any of them. I didn't change the comic formats that I do for my webcomic into webtoons when webtoons exploded, because it would take so much time for me to manage and accommodate that format that, okay, maybe in the future webtoons will be the way to go and I will be left behind. But the fact of the matter is, right now I recognize that I cannot afford more time to do something that's not just continuing my comic. And continuing a comic is the #1 way to make your comic successful. And that is the fact that I always go by. So this is not to say like, okay, these are the things that you should also do because I do it and I do it successfully, or I do it and it works for me. But I'm saying, listen to the way I reason these choices, and being able to see, understand what you have to work with, what you're looking for, and being able to discern that something really exciting, some really exciting opportunity that's coming to you is not necessarily the best opportunity. It's not necessarily an opportunity that's actually fit for you, and it might not further your career, even though it might further somebody else's. And being able to make those kind of choices is the most important thing in being able to build a successful art career out of what you're doing without feeling miserable. Because that's the thing, like, a lot of people can make a good living out of their art by doing all these things that I said in this video not to do. But the bottom line is, a lot of them, because of the fact that they in order to do those things, they have to conform. It's a big sacrifice to make, and at that point, I've said it before, like, if you're going to be miserable doing arts, why even do art in the first place for a living? You can do something else for a living, and then at least, like, even if you do something else and you're also miserable, at least it's not tied to your passion, and then like you're miserable doing things that you're passionate about, right? So yeah, that's the kind of like mental clarity I think is really important for new artists to learn. I find that as a industry or career gets more and more fleshed out, it becomes harder and harder to see these very basic principles of why you should or should not do something based on your own needs and happiness. Because as more methods are proven to work, it becomes more and more difficult to be able to say that method is not for me, or that method does not work for me, or I'm not going to take that method. Because if you don't succeed, people will be like, well, why didn't you do that? You would have like succeeded so much drawing this and that instead of what you're doing. And it's so hard for the artist to be like, well, it doesn't make me happy, right? But I believe in the sense of doing arts, I believe in the sense of doing arts, it's, or any other like artistic creative kind of career, the person's happiness is so important that this is actually like a make or break point. Like, if you can't do this while remaining happy, you really shouldn't do this, because you're doing yourself a disservice. And I believe because of this, that it becoming harder and harder to retain mental clarity throughout your career about why you're doing the things that you're doing is such an important thing for young artists or aspiring artists to keep in mind. Not to get lost in all the ways of, here are the tutorials that you should follow, here are the social media tips that helps you propel your career, here are the do's and don'ts of getting an art career. The more you read those kind of guidelines, the less you remember yourself, which is always the reason why people start drawing in the first place. It's because it makes them happy.